The crystal wine glass shattered against the marble floor as Tiffany Johnson's hands trembled, not from clumsiness, but from the billionaire's ice-cold stare boring into her back. In the most exclusive restaurant in Manhattan, where a single meal cost more than her monthly rent, she had just made the mistake of answering her phone, and Dutch and Walter Graves had heard every word. The amber liquid from the spilled wine spread across the pristine white floor like blood, and Tiffany knew her life was about to change forever. She could feel the weight of every pair of eyes in Le Bernardin's private dining room, eyes that belonged to people who owned skyscrapers, commanded armies of employees, and never, ever had to clean up their own mistakes. "Excuse me," Walter Graves said, his voice cutting through the restaurant's hushed atmosphere like a blade through silk. He didn't need to raise his voice. 30 years of commanding boardrooms had taught him that power whispered, never shouted. "Did I just hear my waitress speaking the language of colonizers in my presence?" Tiffany's heart hammered against her ribcage as she bent to collect the glass shards, her dark skin flushing with humiliation. She had been on the phone with Utrecht University, discussing her graduate application in linguistics, a conversation that had taken place in flawless Dutch because the admissions officer only spoke Dutch and English, and her English, while perfect, carried traces of her Bronx upbringing that she knew would work against her. "I apologize, sir," she whispered, not looking up from the broken crystal. "It was a personal call." "It won't happen again." Walter Graves stood from his chair, all 6 feet 4 inches of him, his Tom Ford suit probably worth more than everything in Tiffany's apartment combined. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his face bearing the kind of tan that came from private islands, not public beaches. He was the kind of man who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. "Personal?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "In my restaurant. During my dinner." He gestured to his dinner companions, other titans of industry whose combined wealth could buy small countries. "Are you a spy? Is that why you're speaking Dutch, planning to sell our business secrets to European competitors?" The other diners chuckled appreciatively. Margaret Whitfield, heiress to a pharmaceutical empire, delicately dabbed her lips with her napkin. "Walter, darling, I think you're giving the help too much credit. She probably just learned a few phrases from some European boyfriend." "Or maybe she's planning to steal our recipes," added Jonathan Pierce, whose hedge fund managed billions. "You know how these people are always looking for a way to make a quick buck." Tiffany's hands stilled on the glass fragments. These people. The words hit her like a physical blow, but she had heard them before, would hear them again. She had been hearing variations of them her entire life, from teachers who assumed she couldn't read, from employers who were surprised she could count change, from strangers on the subway who moved their purses when she sat down. But tonight felt different. Tonight, she had been speaking Dutch, not just any Dutch, but the formal academic Dutch she had learned during her semester abroad at Leiden University, the same Dutch she used in her correspondence with some of Europe's most prestigious linguistic institutions. She had been discussing her thesis on multilingual cognitive processing, a subject that fascinated her more than these people could ever understand. The restaurant manager, Henri Dubois, appeared at her elbow like a shadow. His face was tight with anxiety. Walter Graves was not just any customer, he was an investor in the restaurant group, a man whose displeasure could cost Henri his job. "Miss Johnson," Henri said, his French accent thicker than usual under stress, "please come with me." Tiffany stood slowly, glass fragments forgotten, and followed Henri toward the kitchen. She could hear the resumed conversation behind her, punctuated by laughter that felt like needles against her skin. In the narrow hallway between the dining room and kitchen, Henri's facade of politeness crumbled. His face was flushed with anger and fear, his usual composed demeanor replaced by barely controlled panic. "Are you out of your mind?" he hissed, grabbing her arm harder than necessary. "Do you know who that man is? Walter Graves owns half of Manhattan. He could shut us down with a phone call." "Henri, I don't want to hear it." He was practically spitting. "This is a 5-star establishment. Our clients expect discretion, professionalism, and above all, they expect not to feel like they're dining in some immigration center." The words stung because Henri himself was an immigrant, had come from Lyon 20 years ago with nothing but ambition and a talent for hospitality. But success had given him amnesia about his origins, had taught him that the only way to stay at the top was to pull the ladder up behind him. You're off the floor, he continued. Kitchen duty, dishwashing, floor mopping, whatever chef needs. And if I hear one more word in any language other than English, you're fired. Do I make myself clear? Tiffany nodded, not trusting her voice. She had worked too hard to get this job, had beaten out dozens of other applicants because she spoke 4 languages fluently and could handle the restaurant's international clientele. She needed this job not just for the money, though her mother's medical bills were mounting, but for the connections, the networking opportunities that came with serving New York's elite. She spent the next 6 hours in the kitchen, her hands raw from industrial soap and scalding water. The other staff members gave her pitying looks at first, then began to whisper among themselves. Word traveled fast in the service industry, and by closing time, everyone knew that Tiffany Johnson had been demoted for speaking foreign languages in front of customers. "It's not fair," whispered Maria, one of the other waitresses, as they changed out of their uniforms. "You speak better French than Henri." "And your Italian is perfect," added Giuseppe, the sommelier. "Better than most Italians I know." But fair had nothing to do with it, and Tiffany knew that better than anyone. She had learned early that the world wasn't designed for people like her, young, black, brilliant, but without the right last name or zip code to open doors. She had fought for every opportunity, every scholarship, every chance to prove that she was more than other people's expectations. As she walked to the subway at 2 a.m., her feet aching and her uniform reeking of bleach and disappointment, Tiffany allowed herself one moment of self-pity. She thought about her acceptance letter to Utrecht University's PhD program in applied linguistics, still unopened on her kitchen table because she couldn't afford to hope for something so far beyond her reach. She thought about her thesis proposal on linguistic intelligence and cognitive adaptability, research that could revolutionize how multilingual education was approached in underserved communities. She thought about Walter Graves's cold eyes and the casual cruelty of his words, the way he had reduced her to a stereotype without knowing anything about her mind, her dreams, her capabilities. She thought about how easy it would be to give up, to accept that maybe this was as far as someone like her was meant to go. But by the time she reached her apartment in the Bronx, climbing 4 flights of stairs to her tiny one-bedroom, Tiffany had made a decision. She wouldn't give up. She couldn't. Too many people were counting on her. Her mother, her younger brother still in high school, the kids in her neighborhood who needed to see that there were other ways to escape poverty besides sports and music. She pulled out her laptop and began typing an email to Dr. Vanderberg at Utrecht University. If she was going to be dismissed as just another waitress, she might as well be a waitress with a PhD. The next morning brought autumn rain to Manhattan, the kind of gray, persistent drizzle that made the city look like a noir film. Tiffany arrived at Le Bernardin early, determined to prove that she belonged there, if only temporarily. She had spent the night researching Walter Graves, learning everything she could about the man who had humiliated her. Graves wasn't just wealthy, he was a phenomenon. At 55, he had built a business empire that spanned technology, real estate, and philanthropy. But what interested Tiffany most was his foundation work. The Graves Foundation funded educational initiatives in developing countries, focusing on language preservation and cultural exchange. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was arranging flowers in the lobby when she heard familiar voices. Through the glass doors, she could see Walter Graves approaching with 2 other men in expensive suits. Her stomach clenched, but she forced herself to stand straighter. Whatever happened, she wouldn't cower. Graves entered the restaurant like he owned it, which, she had learned, he essentially did. His eyes swept the lobby and landed on her with recognition and something else. Surprise, maybe? "You," he said, pointing directly at her. "The Dutch girl from last night." "Sir?" Tiffany kept her voice steady, professional. "I need to speak with you, privately." Henry appeared from nowhere, his face pale. "Mr. Graves, Miss Johnson is on kitchen duty today. Perhaps I could—" "No." Graves's voice brooked no argument. "Her. Now." They moved to a private corner of the restaurant, and Tiffany prepared herself for another humiliation. But when Graves spoke, his voice was different, thoughtful, almost puzzled. "Last night when you were on the phone," he began, "you weren't just speaking Dutch, were you?" Tiffany blinked, confused. "I'm sorry? Your accent, your pronunciation. I spent 2 years in Amsterdam in my 20s, did business with Dutch royalty, learned to distinguish between street Dutch and academic Dutch. What you were speaking," he paused, studying her face. "That was university-level Dutch, formal. Sophisticated." Tiffany felt her heart begin to race, but she kept her expression neutral. "I don't understand what you're asking, sir." "I'm asking," Graves said, leaning forward, "how a waitress in New York learned to speak Dutch like a linguistics professor." The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Tiffany could lie, could deflect, could maintain the fiction that she was nothing more than what she appeared to be. But something in Graves's expression, genuine curiosity rather than condescension, gave her pause. "Because I am a linguistics professor," she said quietly. "Or I will be, if I can finish my education." Graves sat back in his chair, his eyes never leaving her face. "Explain." So she did. She told him about her bachelor's degree in linguistics from City College, earned while working 3 jobs and caring for her sick mother. She told him about her semester at Leiden University, funded by a scholarship she had fought for and won against impossible odds. She told him about her acceptance to Utrecht's doctoral program and about the thesis she was writing on multilingual cognitive processing in underserved populations. "I speak 6 languages fluently," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "English, Spanish, French, Dutch, Italian, and Portuguese. I'm conversational in 3 others. I've published 2 papers in peer-reviewed journals, and my research on linguistic adaptability in immigrant communities has been cited by scholars at Harvard and Oxford." Graves was silent for a long moment, processing what she had told him. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "Wow. Why are you working as a waitress?" The question was so simple, yet so loaded with assumptions about merit and opportunity, about the way the world was supposed to work versus the way it actually did. "Because brilliant poor people don't get the same chances as mediocre rich people," Tiffany said, meeting his eyes directly. "Because my research means nothing if I can't afford to continue my education. Because I need to eat while I'm changing the world." Something shifted in Graves's expression, a recognition, perhaps, or a remembering of something he had forgotten about hunger and ambition and the price of dreaming too big. "Last night," he said slowly, "I accused you of being a spy." "Yes, sir. I was wrong." "Yes, sir. I was worse than wrong. I was—" He seemed to struggle with the word. "I was prejudiced. I saw a young black woman speaking a foreign language, and I made assumptions that had nothing to do with reality and everything to do with my own ignorance." Tiffany said nothing, sensing that he needed to work through this himself. "My foundation," Graves continued, "we fund linguistic research around the world. We believe that language preservation is key to cultural survival, that multilingualism is a form of intelligence that should be celebrated, not suppressed." He laughed bitterly. "And yet when I encountered it in real life, in an unexpected context, I responded like a xenophobic fool." "Mr. Graves—" "No, let me finish." He held up a hand. "I built my fortune on the premise that talent exists everywhere, but opportunity doesn't. My foundation exists because I believe that brilliant minds shouldn't be wasted due to accidents of birth or geography. And yet, last night, I nearly wasted yours because I couldn't see past my own preconceptions." He stood up and began pacing, his energy suddenly focused and intense. "Your research," he said, "multilingual cognitive processing in underserved populations. That's exactly the kind of work my foundation should be supporting. Not just funding, but amplifying, making sure it reaches the people who need it most." Tiffany felt a flutter of hope, dangerous and bright. "Sir, I'm not sure I understand." "I'm offering you a position," Graves said, turning to face her. "Head of Linguistic Research and Development for the Graves Foundation. Full PhD funding to Utrecht or any other university you choose. Research budget. Staff. Platform to publish and implement your findings." The words hit Tiffany like a physical force. She gripped the edge of the table to steady herself, certain she had misheard. "You would report directly to me," Graves continued, "and your first project would be developing a comprehensive language education program for underserved communities in New York. Scale it up from there." "Mr. Graves, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he said simply. "Say yes and then help me make sure that what happened last night never happens to anyone else. Use your brilliance to build bridges instead of walls." Tiffany thought about her mother, struggling with medical bills in their Bronx apartment. She thought about her brother, who had the same quick mind she did but fewer opportunities to develop it. She thought about all the kids in her neighborhood who spoke multiple languages, but were told they were deficit instead of gifted, who were punished for their linguistic diversity instead of celebrated for it. She thought about Walter Graves, who had the power to change lives with a single decision, and who was offering to change hers right now. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and sure. "Yes, I'll do it." Graves smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him, and extended his hand. As they shook, Tiffany felt the weight of possibility settling around her shoulders like a cloak. "There's one condition," Graves said as he released her hand. Tiffany's heart skipped. "Sir?" "From now on, in any meeting, any presentation, any public appearance you make as part of this foundation, I want you to speak in whatever language feels most natural to you. Dutch, Spanish, Portuguese, I don't care. Your linguistic gifts are not something to hide. They're something to celebrate." As Tiffany walked out of Le Bernardin for the last time as a waitress, she thought about the power of language, how it could be used to exclude and diminish, but also how it could be used to include and elevate. She thought about the girl from the Bronx who had fallen in love with words in multiple languages, and about the woman she was becoming, who would use those words to change the world. Behind her, Walter Graves was having a very different conversation with Henri Dubois I that ended with Henri's immediate termination and a new policy requiring cultural sensitivity training for all staff. Because some mistakes, Graves had learned, were too important to forgive without fundamental change. And in her pocket, Tiffany carried a business card with her new title, Dr. Tiffany Johnson, Director of Linguistic Research and Cultural Bridge Building, the Graves Foundation. The doctorate wasn't official yet, but Graves had insisted on the title anyway. "You've already earned it through your lived experience," he had said. "The degree is just paperwork." 6 months later, Tiffany would stand before the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, delivering a keynote address on linguistic diversity and educational policy. She would speak in 6 languages during that presentation, switching fluidly between them to demonstrate the cognitive flexibility that multilingualism created. But that morning, walking through the rain-soaked streets of Manhattan toward her new life, Tiffany Johnson simply smiled and spoke her truth to the universe in the language that felt most powerful at that moment. Dutch, the language of her academic dreams, the language that had nearly cost her everything and ultimately given her the world. "Ik ben klaar voor deze uitdaging," zei ze tegen de ochtendlucht. "I am ready for this challenge," and she was.